Hi everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Connection. I'm your host, Donna Wilberg. Well, tonight we are talking about something that really sucks. We are talking about vampires with author Michele Drier. I love to say that.
Vampires? Absolutely.
Vampires.
Absolutely. I'm crazy for them.
Oh, well, let's talk about you first before we launch into
Okay.
talking about your books. What's your background in writing?
Well, I've been writing on and off most of my life. I was in the newspaper business for probably 20 years as a reporter and an editor for San Jose Mercury News, Modesto Bee. I also spent a big chunk of time in nonprofit management, which meant I was writing proposals and grants and annual reports and fundraising letters and things like that. So even though I didn't really I started out actually as a chemistry major in college because women chemists made more money than anybody else at that point. So I kind of fell into writing in general. But once I was in the newspaper business, like a lot of reporters, I had what I always thought of was a half-finished manuscript in my desk drawer. That one didn't turn out to be anything. But there's something about reporters, and it may be because they write nonfiction every day, that fiction really appeals to them. So I said, you know, one of these days I'm going to write the great American novel. I didn't write the great American novel. What I'm writing is genre literature, but I love it. It's really fun.
Well, why vampires?
My first book, and what I thought I was going to be, was a mystery writer. And when I sold the first one, I called my daughter and son-in-law and said, oh, let's go to dinner. And my son-in-law said, what did you write about? And I said, it's a mystery. And he said, why don't you write about vampires? And I said, I've never read a vampire book. I don't know how. And he said, go into any bookstore, look at the mystery section, look at the vampire section. You'll see why you really need to be writing vampires. So I read Charlene Harris, and I read
Anne Rice?
Well, I read Anne Rice a long time ago, yeah. And the Dresden Report, Jim Butcher, and, you know, started reading some of those, and I thought, this really is, it's a very different genre. You make up the entire world, and I thought, I don't know if I can make up the whole world, but what I want to do is write characters who interact with our world. So my vampires are a little bit different.
Well, let's talk about your vampires, because they're pretty yummy.
I think they're really yummy. They're the Kandinsky family, and they started in Hungary about 500 years ago. And I chose Hungary because I've been there. I've never been to Romania. The very first of the Kandinskys was a farmer who was caught in the plague of 1348. His wife died, his son died, and he was absolutely distraught. He was taking his cow into town one day to sell it, and he was attacked by, he didn't know what, turned out to be a vampire who'd been living in the forests of Hungary since probably the Roman legions came through, you know, 1,500 years before that. So he went back, he ended up back in the vampire's lair and was living the vampire life, you know, killing people, living in this really horrendous stench, and one day he wandered away and he came to a manor house and he saw these people who like looked good and smelled good and were clean and were wearing nice clothes, and this was still about 1400, so yeah. And so he snuck into the house and he actually killed the man who lived in the manor house. And then he was kind of stuck because he didn't know what to do. So he decided to live in the real world. So he took over the man's business, which was cloth, trading cloth. And from there they built this huge, he gathered acolytes and converted some other people. He actually married a young woman named Penelope, whose father was a baron, and Penelope's father did not want her to marry this farmer, or what he perceived as a farmer. So when the baron died, he just took on the title. So he became the Baron Stefan Kandinsky and developed this entire trading empire up and down Middle Europe.
So he lived on, the family dies off, the wife, the relatives. I think that's a perfect situation.
Right. No, actually, he turned the woman. He turned the woman, and they became a couple.
Oh,
so it was the Baron and the Baroness. But you know, clearly they have no children.
Yeah.
So as they started growing their family, they chose people who were interesting to them and who wanted to be vampires. And some people really want to be vampires. You're never going to gain weight. You're never going to get old. You know, there are some benefits to that. But they didn't want to
You're
just...
always wealthy.
And wealthy, and
Yeah.
they're very wealthy. They're very wealthy. Yeah, they started amassing this business empire. And then in the early 20th century, they moved to Hollywood. They kind of came in and took over sort of the very early photoplay, you know, magazines like that. And Penelope, the Baron's wife, became a celebrity in her own right. She was a beautiful woman, and she was photographed for years and years and years. Finally, they decided about probably around 2000. The dates are a little hazy in there, but they decided that she probably needed to retire because somebody was going to get the idea that she'd had so many facelifts that something was wrong here. She was never aging. So, but they ended up owning Snap, which is not an acronym for anything. It's the name of their multinational conglomerate of gossip columns. They do radio, they do television, they do magazines, they cover the aristocrats, they cover the riches, they cover the sports, kind of like a Rupert Murdoch on a very broad scale.
That's crazy.
And they're incredibly wealthy.
That's crazy. Yeah. Now I've read Snap, and you've got some delightful characters in there. Where did your ideas for your characters come from?
Wow.
Anybody in particular, or just
not anybody in particular? I just kind of thought, now if I had, kind of like if I won the lottery, if I had all the money in the world, how would I want to live, and what kind of world would I live in? Mm-hmm. So I developed characters that were urbane, that were bright, that were witty, who could live in two worlds, because the main characters are in fact vampires still, who were able to function on a lot of different levels. One thing I did not want my vampires to do was to be static creatures. They are continually evolving and continually living in the world today. And what they face now, instead of other vampire families or werewolves or anyone else, they face the Chechens, they face the terrorists, they face the Russian mafia, they face all of these contemporary terrorist groups. And the last couple of books are actually set in Kiev and Moscow, and they're dealing in arms.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the things that they have is Czechoslovakian Arms Company. They developed that in the 17th century so that they could have their own silver weapons. Mm-hmm. So, but how
do you sleep at night?
Well, actually, I sleep pretty well because I'm very fond of these guys, and I'm kind of crazy for Jean-Louis, who's the major male protagonist. I mean, he's very metrosexual. He's very attractive. He's actually been married before. His wife was killed, and he's a real babe magnet in that sense. But he's very very careful, and he doesn't fall in love very often. He dates a lot. He's dated a lot of women over his life, but he understands that when you fall in love with a regular, there are some real problems inherent in that. And one of which is that she's probably going to age and die before you. Mm-hmm. And is that something that she wants? Is that something that he wants? So he has tended over his life to have very short relationships. But he's very attractive, and he's very sexy, and he's very bright. And as he says, he's richer than Bill Gates.
Is he available?
Pardon?
Is he available?
I wish. He's available in my dreams. That's how I sleep at night. And actually, the second in command of the family is a man named Nikolai, who was from probably Czechoslovakia originally. And he is as light as Jean-Louis. Jean-Louis is very dark hair, dark eyes, almost violet eyes. Nick has kind of surfer blonde hair and these kind of beautiful soft brown eyes. And they're both, very tall and very slim. They have great bodies, not because they work out, but because they're 16th century men who grew up or who didn't grow up, who continued to be on horseback, did very heavy exercise, not in exercise, but worked at it. Mm-hmm. And so when they dress up in dinner suits, tuxedos, and go to the opera, women's heads swivel as they walk by.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they're really fun to write.
I'll bet. I think I'm going to switch genres. Wow. So how many books have you written?
Well, I've written 8 in the Snap series so
Okay.
far, and the 9th I'm hoping to get done next spring. The 9th one is going to be called I, Vampire, and I've sort of got it plotted out. I'm not sure what the 10th one's going to be, but I also write traditional mysteries, and I'm finishing the 3rd of those, so I'm about to publish my 11th book.
How do you do that?
Well,
How many words a minute do you type?
Pardon?
How many words a minute do you type?
Oh, 40 maybe.
Wow.
I don't type very well at all. When I'm writing well, I can write about 3,000 words a day, but I don't do that every day. I write 3 to 4 books a year, but they're not huge books. You know, they're 250 pages, and they're. I think I write very well, and they're funny. They're all fairly ironic and a little bit witty, but it's my full-time job.
Yeah.
So
it's like a vampire, like Dynasty, only with vampires.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's very she and I like that. I like that you incorporate all the different lifestyles into this, in the higher up lifestyle as well.
Yeah, I mean they are she. They're very cultured. They're very lettered, and the older, or they're not the older, but the major vampires, of course, are 400 or 500 years old. So they're very old world. They have very charming. They're only 23, 25, however old they were when they were turned, but they have old world manners and old world ideas about culture and what is good behavior, and they're very, very mannered. And when Maxie, who's the protagonist, who is actually a regular, she becomes in as the managing editor of the magazine Snap. She doesn't know that they're vampires. She doesn't know she's working for a vampire company. And when she runs up against the very self-possessed, cultured women vampires, it's like like a culture clash. They accuse her of being a naif. They accuse her of being unlettered. They accuse her of being rude. And at one point Penelope says to her, I will only take that because I know you don't know any better.
Yeah.
So there's there's some tension there too, but they're really fun to hang around. They have private planes. They have limos. She goes to Paris to shop for clothes. What not to like?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what did you know about vampires before you started writing?
Zero. That's not entirely true. Years and years and years ago, I started a novel for an for an award called the Jackson Phelan Award for Young California Writers. I mean, this was like, I won't tell you how long ago. And my manuscript was there for quite a while. I never heard from them, and I finally got it back again without any comments. That was the year that Anne Rice won that award for Interview with the Vampire.
Okay.
So that, I think that's always been in the back of my head, that the award I was going for was won by a vampire. So. But I like it. I don't like the violence. I'm not crazy about that. And I don't like vampires who are just static creatures. They live for 1,000 years and all they do is kill one another.
Yeah.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, of course, vampires don't either. But but there are some very positive things that otherworldly creatures can do, that paranormal creatures can do, and not that my vampires are pretty amoral. They're not particularly out to save the world. They own arms factories. They deal in gossip. That's how they're looking for money. But they're careful in the process. They're not running roughshod over people.
And what do they feed on?
What do they feed on?
I mean, is there a lot of...
No.
Okay.
Years ago, they decided that it was not worthwhile to kill. So they developed donors. So they use donors. They use animal blood, and they drink bull's blood, but it's not quite the Hungarian kind of Merlot. It's truly bull's blood. They eat steak tartare. They eat borscht. They eat blood pudding. So they have things that they can sit down, because they are so wealthy and they are such media stars. They have massive parties and massive dinners. So they have developed ways to sit and eat a 5-course meal for 25 people in their castle. And it's, the same courses, and Maxie keeps looking over at this really deep red that's, you know, running across this beautiful crystal plate. But they do that. They every so often, probably once or twice a month, they need to have either a donor or they need to actually feed from someone. They need some human blood. But they also have, in their headquarters in LA, they have an office, well, they have a blood bank basically, where people go in and donate blood, and it's kept there until the vampires want it and use it.
You've got this so thought out. I'm so fascinated. Oh, wow. This is crazy.
It's really interesting because, you know, there is some discussion in there about the vampires feeding on blood, and one of the vampires, well, actually the Baron says, well, people have always lived on blood. Most life lives on blood. Insects live on other blood. You know, I mean, blood is that protein that all of us need, and we just found different ways of getting that food. We don't really think that we need to kill somebody in order to be able to feed ourselves.
Well, I think that's great.
It makes for kind of interesting dinner conversation too.
Oh, so you've got humor woven into your storylines and whatnot.
Absolutely, absolutely. And most of the books are first person from Maxie's point of view, and she's very flip. She's kind of LA cool. She was, you know, she worked her way up in gossip magazines. She had a stint with Hello in London, and, you know, so she's knowledgeable, and she's a little bit brash, and she's very, very good at what she does, and she knows that, which is why she was offered the job. So from her point of view, there's a lot of humor and a lot of irony in things. She does a lot of one-liners. There's one line, I think it's in New Talent, where she's been actually attacked in a limousine by the other vampire family, and she says, "This is really great. Here I am in the middle of a rotten industrial park in an old USSR country with bleeding. My gown is falling off. I mean, my shoes are all battered. I've really come far in my career." You know, she has that kind of an attitude about things. But I think one of the reasons that I put that in there is that I really like to laugh myself. And I think if you don't laugh at a lot of things, it's really difficult to get through life.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Do you shapeshifters? Is there shapeshifters?
There are some shapeshifters. There are not a lot of them. Most of the shapeshifters are with the bad family, which is the Hussars. And there are wolves and some bats and birds and things like that. And there are some, I'm not even sure what to call them, but they're small little things that look almost like bats that come in swarms to attack. And they're always coming down the chimneys, and they're coming in through the doors and things like that. And the shapeshifters in general are bad. What I really like are the feral pigs, because when the vampires were roaming around Hungary in the 14th, 15th century and killing off all the villagers, what happened to their animals? Their animals wandered off. The cows died, the horses died, but the pigs were really smart, and they went back into the forest and they became feral. And now the Hussars are using the feral pigs as kind of a shock guard troop, and they also dig up truffles. So the Hussars are making some money on the side with truffles, but not enough. They much prefer, you know. The other sort of otherworldly creatures that I'm really fond of are the demons. And the demons have been with the Kandinsky's since the beginning. I still have not figured out where they came from, but they are the bodyguards, they are the security forces, they are the private army, and they are really interesting guys. They're all guys. They're, you know, big, nice, big, bulky guys. They all wear black suits. That's their uniform. They're absolutely unflappable. You cannot surprise the demon. They're ahead of you. They're stronger than the vampires. They're faster than the vampires, and they take care of the vampires.
Wow. I think I've learned more from you about vampires, and I thought I knew a lot. This is crazy. I'm so enamored with your storytelling that
Thank you.
I'm forgetting what I'm supposed to be asking you here.
Thank you.
So you've got 8 in the series, and how far do you plan to go?
I've got at least the next 2 plotted out. Okay. I don't know beyond that. I mean, I will continue to write them as long as people continue to read them, and I do have a small but very active fan club and a street team who really does follow them, and I love that. This one, Snap, is actually up on Wattpad, which is a website basically that you can put things up and have, and that's had over 1 million reads on Wattpad.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, and most of those are from younger readers. They're like 14 to 18, and that's not an area that I was thinking of as young adults. I wrote these for a fairly mature audience. You know, I'm thinking women between 25 and 50 was my sort of target audience. Yeah. But I found that I've got a YA following on those too.
Well, congratulations. I think that's fabulous. We've
Thank
got
you.
5 minutes left.
Okay.
Why don't you give some information on where people can find your books, where they can contact you, your fan clubs, whatever you need to tell.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, all of my books, both the mysteries and the paranormal romances, are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and iTunes in ebook form. And the first 2 of the Snap right now and 2 of the mysteries are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in paperback. I'm hoping first part next year to get more of the Snap ones into paperback. You can, in fact, go into Barnes & Noble and order that because it's not stocked in the store, but it is in their catalog and you can order them.
Great. So how can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me at my email address, which is Michele Drier, all one word, at att.net, or mjdrier@gmail.com. or my website, which is micheledrier.com.
What about Facebook?
Facebook, absolutely Facebook. I have a straightforward Facebook friend page, and I have a Facebook author page, which is Author Michele Drier at facebook.com. I'm on Twitter, which is, I think it's Michele Drier. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm not even sure what that one is anymore, to tell you the truth. I have, I probably get 200 or 300 emails a day from various things, and I answer emails right away. I love to hear from fans. I love to hear what people think about the books, both good and bad. Yeah. But I love feedback.
Well, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Paranormal Connection.
The Paranormal Connection airs the first and third Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our companion show, Story Connection, airs the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. Each episode repeats the following Friday at 1:30 p.m. and Saturday at 5:30 a.m. Watch these programs online at the same air times by going to accesssacramento.org and clicking Watch 17. In the Sacramento region, you can see us on Comcast Channel 17 and on AT&T Channel 99. You can find previously aired shows on the Paranormal Connection YouTube channel. For information on upcoming shows and previous Paranormal Connection guests, go to paranormalconnectiontv.blogspot.com. You can contact us at paranormalconnectiontv@gmail.com. And don't forget, find us on Facebook, become a friend, and become a fan.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the show, which is hard to believe because it seems like we just sat down. What kind of information would you like to impart to the audience? Anything you'd like to say about your writing, about your books, about...
Well, one thing I would like to say is, this is my full-time job, and it's really kind of cool because for the first time in my life, I get to wear my jammies all day long and play with my imaginary friends. So that part of it is really neat. And I find that writing it's a mixed bag. It's very solitary, and it's sometimes difficult. I just came back from a conference, which you were at, and the sensory overload of having that many people around was just sort of psychically stunning to me after sitting in my little room and writing with these, imaginary people. But I love writing. I would love to share my stories with other people, and I would hope that they're really getting some enjoyment from them. And I also throw in a little bit of current events. There's one scene in one of the later snaps where she's living in Kiev. There's a big discussion about Chernobyl, which is only about 45 miles away from there. And as they're coming through Kiev, they discover that the Ukrainians have set up this huge roadblock and are burning tires. Well, of course, that was written exactly when the Ukrainians were putting up roadblocks and burning tires. So I try and keep some basis of reality and contemporary events in them, too. But I think that makes them a little bit more interesting, too.
That's that journalist in
That's
you.
probably the journalist. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your vampires with us.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to reading more of these. They really are delicious.
Thank
you
very much.
You're welcome.
I mean, you've invited me to talk about one of my favorite things. I appreciate that.
See, I told you it sucks, didn't I? Okay, so thank you so much for everybody for coming on the show, watching the show tonight. And I have to thank my fabulous crew for coming out and volunteering their time. I really appreciate it. And without them, we wouldn't have the opportunity to feature fabulous people like Michele Drier. Thank you guys. And everybody out there, take a look, give Michele a read, and enjoy.